Reborn, I stopped fighting my cousin for my family's love. When I opened my eyes, a torrent of foreign memories crashed into my skull with agonizing force. I had been a modern-day auditor who died from overwork, and now I found myself inhabiting the body of Gu Wansu, the 15-year-old legitimate daughter of the Duke of Dingwa, who had been raised in seclusion at a rural estate outside the capital. The original girl had been sent away at age 5 by her grandmother under the pretense of recuperating in the countryside, her parents having departed for the northwestern frontier when she was merely 2. For 13 long years, she had languished in this remote hamlet. Last night, in the dead of winter, pneumonia had claimed her, no physician, no warm broth, just the merciless cold. The door groaned open and was kicked wide, a blast of snow-laden wind biting at my face. If you're going to die, do it quickly, don't follow the Kong with your ill fortune. Heated brick bed. A stout woman barged in, slapping a bamboo basket still radiating cold air onto the wooden table with a heavy thud. That was Stewardess Wei. She wore a half-new cotton satin jacket, a plain silver hairpin thrust into her coiffure, and from her sleeve peeked the corner of a heavy silver ingot. I propped myself against the icy wall and sat up slowly. Cold sweat trickled into the corners of my eyes, stinging, but my mind was razor-sharp. The auditor's instincts honed from years of scrutinizing corporate ledgers told me something was deeply wrong at this estate. Stewardess Wei, I said, my voice dry and rasping like sandpaper on stone, my allowance, charcoal supply, and the monthly medicinal herbs allocated from the household accounts all were due for settlement last month. Wei froze for a moment, then threw her head back with a mocking laugh. She shuffled closer, baring yellowed teeth. Has the second miss lost her wits? The manor cut off our provisions 3 months ago. The Northwestern campaign has strained the household coffers. I've been keeping you alive on my own course kanji out of the kindness of my heart, and instead of gratitude, you interrogate me? Household coffers strained? I pressed a hand to my heaving chest, fixing her with an icy stare. The Duke's forces crushed the Western Rhone 3 months ago. The victory dispatch has been the talk of the capital's outskirts. Moreover, the Duke of Dingwa's ancestral rules stipulate that legitimate children fostered outside the main residence are supported directly from the eldest branch's private funds, entirely separate from military expenditures. You invoke wartime hardships as if I know nothing of great households' inner workings? The flesh on Wei's face twitched violently. Her gaze darted away as she shrank back. And furthermore, I raised a finger, pointing at the silver glinting from her sleeve. Both the Great Ming Code and the Duke's household regulations make it a grave offense for servants to privately hoard official silver. That ingot you're concealing bears the stamp of the Yongding pawnshop. Your monthly stipend is a mere 2 taels. How does a rural stewardess have business trading high-value goods in the capital's pawnshops? Wei's eyelids fluttered uncontrollably. She instinctively clutched her sleeve and shrieked, "You venomous little wretch! You slander me! On your deathbed and still running your mouth, I'll teach you some respect." With that, she raised her meaty palm to strike my face. I didn't flinch. Instead, I let my gaze turn to steel and my voice rise, sharp as a blade. Stewardess Wei. Open your eyes and see who stands before you. I am the legitimate second miss of the Duke of Dingwa's household. A servant who strikes her master faces death by beating under imperial law. Theft of a master's allowance and trafficking of private property warrants banishment to Ninguda. My father's army, triumphant alongside His Majesty, returns to the capital today. If you lay a finger on me now, by tomorrow's carriage ride into the city, I will lay this estate's crooked ledgers and your pawn tickets before the clan court and the Ministry of Justice, every last entry. Wei's arm hung suspended mid-swing. Her face drained from red to bone-white. Staring into my cold, fearless eyes, she seemed frozen solid. Before the iron hierarchy of the ancient world and the dread of capital punishment, this bully who had reigned unchecked for years found her nerve utterly shattered by my pinpoint accuracy. Fetch the account books. I stepped closer, looking down at her. Don't force me to make my first act upon returning home a request for the household discipline staff to come seize you here. Panic seized Wei completely. The timid, stammering girl she had known was gone. Now every word out of my mouth struck her vital spots with surgical precision. I'll fetch them. I'll fetch them. Mercy, second miss, the ledgers are hidden in the west wing, between the bricks. Wei fumbled a ring of copper keys from her bosom and collapsed to her knees. Half an hour later, I opened the greasy, foul-smelling secret ledger. The entries were damningly clear. For the past 5 years, the 500 taels of restorative silver, 3,000 caddies of premium charcoal, and rare medicinal herbs allocated annually by the Duke's Manor had all been sold off by Stewardess Wei and her nephew to black market dealers on the capital's outskirts. The original girl had survived 13 years on scraps and grit-laden coarse rice. And worst of all, the final line of the ledger read, received a secret missive from the old matriarch's personal maid 3 days prior, ensure the second miss perishes from illness before the Duke's return. Rage surged in my chest. The biased old matriarch of the Duke's Manor, and the shadowy figure who had wanted the original girl dead, I would collect every debt on her behalf, with interest. Dawn broke the following morning. The thunder of hooves shattered the estate's silence. For high-stepping steeds drew an ornate, gold-trimmed carriage to a halt before the estate gates. The steward, accompanied by several tall servants, strode briskly through the crumbling courtyard and called out, "Where is the second miss?" "The Duke and Duchess have returned victorious, they've already passed the city gates. The old matriarch has sent me to escort the second miss home." I emerged from the woodshed, clad in a threadbare, patched cotton jacket, my face pale but composed, clutching the sheaf of blood-stained evidence in my hands. The steward caught sight of my gaunt, icy demeanor and drew a sharp breath. A flicker of guilt and unease crossed his face. "What's the hurry, steward?" I paced unhurriedly toward the carriage, a smile colder than frost curling at my lips. "Go back and tell grandmother and my parents, 13 years is a long time. Wansu has prepared a gift for them. I'll present it in person when I arrive." The carriage wheels crunched over snow and came to a stop before the Duke of Dinghua's main gate. The vermilion doors swung wide open. A double row of servants in fine livery stood in attendance. Firecrackers thundered along Vermilion Bird Avenue, filling the air with the acrid tang of gunpowder. Duke Gu Huiyuan dismounted in full armor, his sword clanking with each heavy step. From the gilded carriage behind, my mother Jiang Yinshu descended gracefully, holding the hand of my 14-year-old brother Gu Yanhe, while the old matriarch clung to the arm of her adopted daughter Chu Qinghuan. Everyone gathered in the Hall of Glorious Felicity, where floor heating made the room as balmy as spring, the air thick with the sweet haze of aloeswood and storax incense. I stood in the shadow of a side door, wearing a washed-out blue jacket with subtle mending along the hem, so thin from years of malnutrition that I seemed a paper cut out among all the silks and satins. "Yunshu, this northwestern triumph, the Emperor's rewards have been generous, and you've brought back such treasures from the frontier." The old matriarch beamed from her purple sandalwood chair, her wrinkles folding like a chrysanthemum in full bloom. Jiang Yinshu wore the practiced smile of a virtuous wife and mother. She gestured for her senior maid to present several heavy lacquered cosmetic cases. "Mother, see this white jade guanine, Huiyuan acquired it from a western region merchant. It would be perfect for the shrine in your chambers." Jiang Yinshu presented it personally, and the matriarch showered it with praise. Then Jiang Yinshu turned and took a fine jade pendant from a red lacquered tray, fastening it at Gu Yanhe's waist. "Yanhe, this dark jade will smooth your path at the Imperial Academy." The boy beamed and bowed his thanks. Next, she produced a stunning headpiece of gold filigree and pearls, setting it upon the adopted daughter Chu Qinghuan's hair with tender care. "Qinghuan, you've been delicate all these years, and you've done so much to care for the matriarch in my absence. This is from your mother, especially for you." Chu Qinghuan blushed demurely and murmured her gratitude. The maids distributed more boxes to the household, even the senior serving girls receiving fine silver combs from the borderlands. The red tray was empty. Laughter and merriment filled the hall, yet no one noticed the legitimate second daughter standing empty-handed on the cold brick floor. I had seen every shade of human favoritism in my former life auditing corporate accounts, so I felt nothing but cold observation as I watched this meticulously orchestrated habitual forgetting. "Duchess," the shrewd steward stepped forward cautiously, "the second miss has arrived from the estate." The air froze. Jiang Yinshu's hand, mid-motion in dispensing rewards, hung suspended. Her smile hardened into a grimace. She turned sharply toward the shadowed side door where I stood, her gaze shifting from confusion to shock, then to a flush of excruciating embarrassment and guilt. Wonsu? Jiang Yinshu's voice trembled. Her fingers, outstretched toward the empty tray, quivered almost imperceptibly. Mother. Mother didn't know you would arrive today, the gifts. They're in the back trunks, not yet unpacked. A flimsy excuse. 13 years apart, and upon entering the city, she had distributed gifts to everyone except her own legitimate daughter. This was habitual neglect, the bone-deep estrangement of absence made flesh. Gu Huayuan frowned, taking in my threadbare clothes and pallid face. Pain and shame flickered across his features. He growled, Yunshu, how did you manage this? The festive atmosphere plummeted. Chu Qinghuan lowered her head, twisting her handkerchief. Gu Yanhe touched the jade at his waist, looking at me with confusion. All eyes fixed on me, waiting for a tearful outburst or a bitter reproach. I stepped forward from the shadows, spine straight as a blade. I performed a flawless wanfu, traditional female salute, measured, graceful, impeccable, before the assembled company. Father, mother, I said, my voice clear and emotionless. 13 years have passed. Your safe return from the frontier, repelling the enemy, that is gift enough for me. Material things are but worldly trifles. There is no need for mother to dwell on this, nor to hastily make amends. Polite. Magnanimous. And cold as ice, putting an impenetrable distance between myself and the blood ties that should have bound us. Jiang Yinshu, hearing this placid no blame, turned more ashen than if I had cursed her to her face. She opened her mouth, but no words emerged. In that frozen moment, a herald's cry rang from beyond the gate. His Highness the Prince of Zhao arrives, bearing the Emperor's oral decree, with imperial wine and rewards for the Duke of Dinghua. The entire household startled. Gu Huayuan led everyone in kneeling as a flurry of silks and robes swept to the floor. Footsteps rang steady across the threshold. A tall, imposing figure entered, dressed in dark robes embroidered with gold serpentine patterns, a white jade belt clasped at his waist. Qi Yuding's expression was stern, his bearing marked by the sharp edge of battlefield and court alike, commanding a deference that no one dared defy. He delivered the imperial decree with practiced formality, then raised Gu Huayuan with a slight gesture, Rise, Duke. I am merely fulfilling the Emperor's errand. As the assembled company rose and gave thanks, Qi Yuding's gaze swept across the crowd and came to rest on me, the last to rise, shabbily dressed yet composed. The conversation he had overheard upon entering, the subtle snub, he had caught it all. And this is? Qi Yuding's cool voice cut through the hall, his eyes fixed on my face. Gu Huayuan hastened to respond, Your Highness, this is my younger daughter, Wansu. She has been convalescing at an estate outside the capital and was brought back today. Convalescing? The faintest, sharpest of smiles curved Qi Yuding's lips. His gaze swept over my frost-chapped knuckles and the utter absence of warmth in my eyes. The Duke's household has a unique approach to convalescence. To my eye, this young lady possesses clear, perceptive eyes and a ready tongue, more spirit, I'd say, than the pampered misses of the capital. Jiang Yinshu and Gu Huayuan flushed crimson. I looked up and met Qi Yuding's eyes, deep as an abyss, dark as a wintry pool. He said nothing more, but that one searching, appraising glance had rent a gash in the Duke's household's gilded hypocrisy. The cold wind howled through the gap beneath the vermilion gate, rattling the red lanterns in the Hall of Glorious Felicity. I withdrew the yellowed, travel-stained ledger from within my robes and presented it with both hands. Father, mother, this is the secret account I discovered at the estate. Stewardess Wei embezzled the allocated allowances and medicinal herbs. By both imperial law and the Duke's household regulations, she should be handed over to the authorities. But since this concerns the assets assigned to me and the estate records, I ask that you both come to the estate to verify the matter in person. Gu Huayuan's face darkened. He slammed his palm on the rosewood tea table, rattling the celadon cups. Jiang Yinshu's eyes reddened. Her fingers twisted her handkerchief to shreds as she cried, "Send for the carriage at once. I will see for myself who dares to cheat my child under the Duke's own roof." Half an hour later, 2 plain green carriages crunched through the snow and pulled up before the estate's sagging gate. The air reeked of moldy herbs and stagnant water. Jiang Yinshu stepped down, and her embroidered slipper promptly sank into slushy mud thinly crusted with ice. She stared at the crumbling wall, the window holes stuffed with rags, and the dilapidated courtyard, and recoiled as if struck. This is where Wansu has lived for 13 years? Jiang Yinshu's voice cracked. Tears poured down her face unbidden. I crossed the threshold and walked straight to the low earthen hut beside the woodshed. I pushed open the groaning door. Inside was a plank bed heaped with straw, a few chunks of moldy, rotten firewood huddled in the corner. I went to the cold hearth, reached deep into the ashes, and retrieved an oilpaper bundle of blackish medicinal dregs. I dumped it on the table. "Look closely, Mother," I said, pointing to the dried bark and weeds among the dregs. "This is the tonic stewardess Wei decocted for me every day, counterfeit garbage bought for a few coppers a caddy from the black market, laced with poisonous weeds. The original owner of this body, I drank this medicine and survived countless snowy nights in this room." Jiang Yinshu lurched to the table, her trembling fingers lifting a pinch of the dregs. The acrid, musty stench hit her nose, and her stomach convulsed. Her legs gave way. She crumpled to the floor, pounding her chest as she wailed, "My child. Mother has failed you. I thought you were being tended by physicians. I was so blind." Gu Huayuan's face was ashen, veins bulging at his temples. He strode into the yard and barked orders to his accompanying guards, "Tie up that treacherous servant. Strap her to the horse post, I'll question her myself." The guards moved swiftly, roping the now prostrate Wei and pressing her face into the snow. Wei's forehead scraped the frozen ground. She trembled violently, shrieking for mercy, "Mercy, Duke! I was only following orders." It was the old matriarch's personal maid, stewardess Chui. She took half the profits every month. She said the matriarch favored Miss Qinghuan and instructed me to withhold Wansu's allowance so she wouldn't come back to the capital and cause trouble. The truth landed like a battering ram against Gu Huayuan and Jiang Yinshu's hearts. I paid no heed to the servant's pleas. I walked to the plank bed, knelt, and probed the crevice between bed frame and wall. My fingers found a bundle of old rice paper, yellowed with moisture, stuffed deep between the bricks. I pulled it out, letters, written in crooked, childish script with a broken bamboo twig dipped in ink. 3rd month, 15th day. Miss Mother. Had cold congee today. Stomach hurts. 7th month, 7th day. Heard father is in the great battle. May the gods protect him and bring him home to fetch Wansu. 12th month, 8th day. The snow is so deep, so cold. I don't think I can wait for father and mother anymore. The final page was blurred, overlaid with dried bloodstains and tear tracks. Jiang Yinshu snatched the sheaf of letters, clutched them to her chest, and sobbed until she nearly fainted, "My baby. My Wansu. Mother will take you home. Mother will give you the finest things in the world. Mother will favor you above all." Gu Huayuan, a battle-hardened warrior who had seen men die by the thousand, reddened around the eyes. His stalwart frame seemed to bow as he reached for my shoulder, voice hoarse, "Wansu, come home with father. I will see justice done, I will root out every corrupt servant in the household." I stepped back half a pace, evading his outstretched hand. Standing in the center of that icy hovel, my gaze clear and far away, I showed neither hatred nor joy at our reunion. "Mother, father," I smoothed my thin sleeve, my tone as calm as if I were recounting a stranger's tale. "These letters were written by a girl of 5, abandoned here, who pressed her ear to the wall every day waiting for her parents to come home. She ran to the gate at every sound of hooves. She cried out for her mother in every fever." I met Jiang Yinshu's tear-drowned eyes. But that girl who waited so desperately froze to death last night, in the wind and snow. The one standing before you now is merely the nominal legitimate daughter of the Duke of Dingwa. What we must settle is the embezzled assets, the dignity of the household laws and the imperial code. As for belated affection and favor, I shook my head gently, a polite, distant smile on my lips. I neither want nor need them. Jiang Yinshu stood petrified, her wailing silenced. She stared at my cold, self-possessed eyes and finally understood. She had lost not only 13 years of her daughter's life, she had lost her daughter's heart entirely. At that moment, the thunder of hooves sounded beyond the estate. A troop of Imperial guardsmen reined up, and a deputy commander dismounted to deliver a message. Duke of Dingwa, His Highness the Prince of Zhao requests your presence. They've apprehended a key witness in the case of black market trafficking with the Western Rong, and await your joint interrogation. I raised an eyebrow. Black market collusion with the Western Rong? The stolen medicinal herbs and imperial goods Stewardess Wei had sold had led to a treason investigation? The bronze wind chimes beneath the yellow glazed eaves clattered in the bitter wind. The old matriarch sat high on her purple sandalwood dais, rolling a pair of polished walnuts in her palm, her eyes sharp as she surveyed the room. Now that Wansu has returned, we must observe propriety in arranging her quarters. The Eastern Clear Radiance Court has the finest light and exposure. It's the proper residence for a legitimate daughter of the Duke. But Qinghuan has occupied it for 5 years, and she's accustomed to it. Wansu, as the elder, you are steady and sensible. You may take the bamboo listening pavilion in the north. This will show your forbearance toward your adopted sister. Chu Qinghuan sat below, twisting her handkerchief with white-knuckled fingers, her eyes red-rimmed as she cast an anxious glance my way. The old woman's gambit was transparent. Use the courtyard assignment as bait to pit me against the orphan Chu Qinghuan, keeping the household reins firmly in her own grasp. I flicked a speck of dust from my sleeve and met the matriarch's gaze. Grandmother, I beg to differ. Clear Radiance Court is designated by imperial ritual as the legitimate daughter's main courtyard. Sister Qinghuan is the daughter of a fallen deputy general, adopted by my father in honor of military brotherhood. She should be housed in a separate, elegant residence befitting that honor. If, as grandmother suggests, we let an adopted daughter occupy the legitimate heir's court, news would reach the capital's ministers and censors, and the Duke's household would be mocked for confusing rank and mistreating a hero's orphan, while slighting its own legitimate line. The walnuts in the matriarch's hands stopped mid-roll. Her face darkened visibly. Chu Qinghuan's eyes widened in astonishment. She had clearly expected me to direct my resentment at her. Instead, I had just cleared her of any moral stain of usurping the main courtyard. 3 days later, at the spring flower viewing banquet in the Duke's rear garden, clusters of red plum blossoms bloomed amid the capital's nobility. Several pampered young ladies from high-ranking families gathered by the waterside pavilion, nibbling sweet cheese pastries, their gossip carrying clearly on the breeze. See that one? The orphan girl the Duke of Dingwa took in, the one rescued from a pile of corpses. Such a common air about her, and she dares wear gold-embroidered silk? Indeed. I hear the real legitimate daughter is back, and she can't even keep her main courtyard. She's just a parasite with no family to back her. Chu Qinghuan's face was deathly pale. Her hands trembled so badly that tea slopped over her sleeve, and she hunched her shoulders, wishing the ground would swallow her. I stepped across the pavilion's railing, the crisp clack of my wooden clogs cutting through the chatter. I walked up to the ringleader, the daughter of the Duke of Anghua, and looked down at her with a cold smile. Lady Gao, you have quite the nerve. Sister Qinghuan's father fell in battle on the northwestern front, shielding our fathers and brothers. The emperor himself honored him with posthumous commendations. The Duke of Dingwa's household regards her as kin. And you choose to insult a hero's orphan here, in public? Does the Duke of Anghua's household teach its daughters to slander the children of fallen soldiers? The Lady Gao's face went livid. The surrounding noblewomen turned to murmur and stare. Chastened and humiliated, she flung down her handkerchief and withdrew from the pavilion in haste. Chu Qinghuan looked up at me, tears finally spilling over. After the banquet dispersed, I led my attendants straight to Chu Qinghuan's side courtyard. No sooner had I entered the gate than I heard the sharp crack of broken porcelain and an abusive voice. Cry, 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 that's all you're good for. You're nothing but a stray surname, a nobody. Now that the matriarch and duchess have their own daughter back, who cares about you? Hand over that gold Buddha the matriarch gave you as a betrothal gift for my cousin, or I'll spread word through the rear household that you're a thief. The senior maid Chui Chiao stood with fists on her hips, hurling abuse at Chu Qinghuan, a fine celadon cup shattered at her feet. I pushed the door open, my gaze iron-cold. Insolence. Since when does a servant of the duke's household lord it over her master? Chui Chiao recognized me but showed no fear, relying on her seniority as the matriarch's appointee. She raised her chin defiantly. Second miss, this is none of your affair. This is Miss Chu's chamber, and the matriarch has said, crack. My palm connected with her cheek, the slap echoing through the room. Chui Chiao hit the floor, clutching her mouth as a bloody tooth dropped from her lips. That first blow was for a servant bullying her master, violating all hierarchy, I said coldly. The second blow is for extorting your mistress in the household's name, shaming the duke's reputation. I turned to my guards. Bind this insolent wretch and take her directly to mother's courtyard. Convey my exact words, apply the household rod 20 times, extract her teeth, and sell her to a distant estate. Don't dirty the matriarch's and the duke's good name. Chui Chiao's face strained. She crumpled like wet clay as the guards seized her, gagged her, and dragged her out. Silence fell. Chu Qinghuan sat on the couch, her earlier wariness and fear melted away. She rose and performed a formal bow of equal courtesy toward me. Second sister, she said, her voice rough with relief, I was foolish before. I curried favor with the matriarch and mother, thinking that if I clung to their partiality, I could survive. But today I see, what you gain by fawning is built on sand. I sat down across from her and poured a cup of warm tea, pushing it toward her. This domestic quagmire is a trap others set. Your father and brothers won glory on the battlefield. You have no need to please anyone, no need to diminish yourself. From now on, in this household, we don't vie for hollow favor, we stake our claim to dignity and our rightful place. Chu Qinghuan accepted the cup, a genuine smile brightening her eyes, and nodded firmly. Late that night, a spark leaped from the candle on the sandalwood desk. Chu Qinghuan drew from her bosom a folded piece of sheepskin parchment and slid it across to me, lowering her voice. Second sister, this is the black market transaction receipt and seal my father intercepted before his death on the frontier. Someone at court has been trafficking forbidden weapons and imperial medicinal herbs to the western Rhone. And the mark on the seal seems connected to the old matriarch's maternal cousins. I studied the ancient private seal on the parchment, my eyes narrowing sharply. A whistle broke through the dense forest, a black-feathered arrow, poisoned, skimmed past my temple and thudded into the red pine behind me, its fletching quivering violently. I wrenched the reins. My chestnut mare reared with a shrill neigh. From the shadows of the woods, 3 black-clad assassins burst forth, curved blades gleaming with a bluish, venomous sheen as they charged across the snow. The matriarch's maternal cousins had evidently grown desperate. They had learned that the black market trafficking receipts and seal had fallen into my hands, and they were determined to silence me before the royal hunt ended. I drew the short crossbow from my saddle, aimed, and fired. The bolt struck the lead assassin square in the knee. But the other 2 were upon me, icy blades whistling toward my face. Clang! A resounding clash of metal split the air. A shadow in black plummeted from the treetops like a hunting falcon, his steel longsword carving a lethal arc. The lead assassin's throat erupted in a spray of crimson before he could even scream, and he crumpled into the snow. Chi Yuding stood before me, his sword dripping blood. He wore dark hunting robes, a white jade pendant at his belt, his eyes as cold as the northern gales. The 2 remaining assassins lunged, but the royal guards emerging from the woods subdued them in an instant, pinning them into the blood-stained snow. Chi Yuding turned and sheathed his blade. His frigid gaze swept over me and lingered on my still-warm palms. Your hands, are you hurt? I steadied my breath, returned the crossbow to its saddle holster, and met his eyes. "Thank you for the rescue, Your Highness. I can defend myself adequately. The assassins were after those treasonous transaction receipts." "I know." Chi Yuding stepped closer and reached out, his long fingers gently plucking a pine needle from my temple. The gesture was utterly natural, his voice low and resonant. "The seal and receipts you sent to my manor via Chuchenhuan 3 days ago, I have already investigated them. The mastermind behind the scenes, who colluded with the matriarch's cousins, has been detained by the Ministry of Justice. These assassins in the hunting grounds are merely the death throes of cornered rats." I blinked in surprise. He had moved with remarkable speed, safeguarding both me and Chu Qinghuan while untangling the web that spanned court and inner household. That afternoon, on the hunting pavilion, yellow silk spread across the stands and officials sat in orderly rows. The old emperor, lounging on his dragon throne, watched his son return from the hunt with an amused smile, then studied me standing composedly nearby. Stroking his beard, he said, "Yuding, you've taken the stag's head with a single shot, a fine merit indeed. I hear the Duke of Dingwa's second daughter is both cultured and spirited, with a resolute character. The Duke is a meritorious subject, and you are my most favored prince. I intend to decree the marriage of the second Miss Gu to you as your primary consort. What say you?" Jiang Yinshu shifted uneasily, glancing at me. An imperial betrothal was a supreme honor in this feudal court, and a command not to be refused. Any ordinary girl would have knelt in thanks. But Chi Yuding stepped forward, knelt on one knee, and replied in a clear, ringing voice that carried across the entire pavilion, "Father, forgive me, I cannot accept this betrothal decree." The pavilion fell deathly silent. Officials exchanged bewildered looks. Even the emperor's smile faded. "Insolent!" The emperor slapped his armrest. "You have always shunned women, and now I personally choose a worthy match for you, and you dare refuse?" "Father, hear me." Chi Yuding raised his head, his gaze frank and unflinching. "The second Miss Gu has endured years of hardship. She has only recently been vindicated and returned home. Her wounds are still raw, her duties to her family unfulfilled. She is a woman of spirit, not one who covets power and rank. If I were to use your Majesty's authority to coerce her into marriage, would that not be taking advantage? If I am to wed her, I will do so according to ancient rites. I will come to her door as a suitor and offer my full sincerity, not rely on an imperial edict. I ask your Majesty to grant me this chance to prove my earnest intentions." His words were measured and forceful, affirming the emperor's dignity while laying bare his respect for me before the entire court. In this age of arranged marriages and patriarchal authority, a prince of the blood had publicly returned the power of choice and dignity to a woman. The emperor stared at his son for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed heartily. "Fine. Fine. A son who will not coerce. Well, your affairs are your own. I wash my hands of it." The sun sank toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the maple grove behind the hunting grounds, fallen leaves rustled beneath our feet. Chi Yuding unfastened his cloak and draped it over my thin shoulders. It carried his scent, faint pine and sandalwood, still warm with his body heat. He turned to face me, his dark eyes, usually so cold, now filled with earnest tenderness. "Wansu, what I said on the pavilion was no performance for the officials." I gripped the edge of his cloak, my heartbeat faltering. "Your Highness, I am not a woman who tolerates pretense. I have no desire to be a hothouse flower waiting for a husband's favor. I have my own endeavors, my own clear boundaries." Chi Yuding's lips curved into a genuine, adoring smile. "I know your sharpness with accounts, your clarity in the face of family coldness. I see all of it. I promise you this, if you become Princess of Zhao, you will remain free. The manor's private treasury and accounts will be at your disposal. You may run businesses, assist in judicial investigations, whatever you wish, I will support it. In Zhao Manor, no one will force you to compromise. I give you unconditional favor and protection." No empty flattery, only the promise of respect, understanding, and absolute freedom. The armor I had built around my heart, forged through a former life of corporate combat and this life's domestic intrigue, crumbled in that moment. Very well. I lifted my head to meet his gaze, the sunset blazing in my eyes, and smiled with confidence. Since the Prince of Zhao is so sincere, I will walk this path with you. But if ever you break your word today, should that day come, Qi Yuding pressed my shoulders firmly, his gaze resolute, I submit myself entirely to your judgment. We stood among the maples, sealing this pact of equals. 3 days later, before the betrothal gifts had even arrived, a shocking rumor swept the capital. A treason suspect held in the Ministry of Justice's dungeons had dropped dead overnight, black blood foaming from his mouth, and all evidence pointed to my own paternal uncle, the old matriarch's biological son. The iron locks of the ministry's heavy prison groaned as they were forced open. Damp, moldy air gushed from the passage. On the eve of my wedding, at dusk, I sat dressed in plain moonlight-white robes on the carved Nanmu chair in the ministry's interrogation chamber. Beyond the lattice partition, my uncle Gu Huaijie, in prisoner's garb, iron shackles around his ankles, hair in disarray, knelt on the brick floor. Third uncle, did you truly think the dead merchant in the dungeon, poisoned with black blood, would sever all your ties? I lifted a celadone teacup, skimming its surface, my voice cool. You used the matriarch's cousin's black market channels to sell military medical supplies and iron to the Western Rong, enriching yourself beyond measure. You even orchestrated my banishment to that estate at age 5, you bribed stewardess Chui to whisper in grandmother's ear. You feared I would grow up to inherit the eldest branch's private wealth and block your path to the title. Gu Huaijie's eyes were bloodshot, his teeth grinding audibly, wretched girl. The victor writes history. Don't pretend to be righteous. If you hadn't latched onto the Prince of Zhao, with your biased grandmother and your spineless parents, the Duke's manor would have been mine by now. Unfortunately, you miscalculated. I set down the teacup and tossed several sheets of testimony, blood printed by black market traders, at his feet. Every tale of public funds you embezzled, I've traced it all with my own method of forensic accounting and handed the treason correspondence to Qi Yuding. The emperor has decreed, Gu Huaijie stripped of rank and title, banished 3,000 li. The matriarch, for abetting him, stripped of her noble title and confined to a side courtyard for life. You schemed your whole life, and it came to nothing. Gu Huaijie stared at the bloodied papers, his spine seeming to dissolve as he collapsed, a sound of utter despair escaping his throat. The following spring, a 10-mile-long procession of red bridal finery filled the streets. Flutes and drums played the jubilant 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. Vermilion Bird Avenue was packed with onlookers, red carpets stretching from the Duke's Gate to the Prince of Zhao's residence. Qi Yuding, astride a tall steed in red robes embroidered with gold serpents, radiant as the sun, arrived at the Duke's Gate. Before the assembled officials and citizens of the capital, he dismounted, crossed the threshold, and wrapped his cloak tenderly around my shoulders, clasping my hands in his. The game is won, he said, his voice low with warm laughter and devotion. I have come to escort my princess home. 6 months into our marriage, at the third-floor private chamber of Qing Hui and Company. On Vermilion Bird Avenue, piles of ledgers covered the table. I sat cross-legged on a cushioned couch, one hand on the abacus, the other holding a vermilion brush as I reviewed reports from my branch managers. Using my past life's financial skills, I had established a chain of banks and medical dispensaries across the capital in Jiangnan, controlling a third of the capital's commercial cash flow, with Chu Qinghuan as my chief accountant. Beyond the pearl string curtain, Chu Qinghuan conferred with several wealthy southern merchants. One young manager bowed respectfully. The princess's calculations are infallible, her brilliance extraordinary, such auditing skill is truly admirable. Just then, the heavy chamber door creaked open. Qi Yuding stood in the doorway in plain moonwhite robes, his expression icy. The young manager startled and stepped back hastily. Qi Yuding swept a cold glance across the outer room, strode through the curtain, and pulled it firmly shut behind him. The others took the hint and filed out, closing the door. I raised an eyebrow, setting down my brush. What brings your highness to the trading house today? Qi Yuding's brows arched. He pulled me into his arms, settled me on his lap, and bit my ear lightly, his voice dripping with playful jealousy. That southern manager's eyes were too bold. He dares praise you through a curtain? You are my rightful princess, and all the capital, all the world, knows I brook no rivals. If he looks at you again, I'll send him to count sand in the northwest. He was making a business report. I laughed, swatting his arm. Besides, the 30,000 taels Qinghui and Company earned last month, I invested them all in your military supply budget. I'm not just your princess, I'm your financial backer. Qi Yuding's eyes gleamed with pride and adoration. He wrapped his arms tight around my waist, burying his face in my neck, a low laugh rumbling from his chest. Very well, my financial backer. From this day forward, I am yours, this manor and the troops under my command, all at your disposal. Winter deepened. Snow poured from the heavens in a ceaseless torrent. I stood atop the manor's high tower, wrapped in a sable cloak, with Qi Yuding beside me, overlooking the snow-dusted capital. The wind howled, stinging our cheeks, but it no longer carried the bone-deep despair of that estate 13 years ago. I reached out and caught a snowflake, watching it melt in my warm palm. In my mind's eye, the little girl in her patched cotton jacket, huddled in the corner through countless frigid nights, waiting in vain for her parents to come, seemed to smile at me from the swirling snow, then slowly dissolved into the white haze. I was no longer the lonely soul begging for affection and favor, no longer a dependent trapped by domestic chains. I had torn through the darkness with my own hands, settled old scores, found my footing, and forged my own path. Qi Yunting unfastened his cloak and wrapped us both in its warmth, pulling me into his embrace. We stood together amid the snow and sky, hands clasped, our eyes fixed on the future with unshakable resolve and serenity. Equal in strength, bound in love, the long, rich tapestry of life together had only just begun. The story is now complete. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and support me.